Hey guys, we're back with Unwrapping the Pharaoh, looking at lesson number 22, and we're going to be talking about the boy king Tutankhamun, okay? The book starts out with this, saying Akhenaten's brother, Smenkhare, is generally thought to have followed Akhenaten on the throne, but some have suggested that Smenkhare was actually Nefertiti. In any case, that reign, if any, was very brief, and the next monarch was the boy king Tutankhaten, presumably a son of Akhenaten by his second wife, Kia. Okay? This boy king eventually gets known as King Tut and becomes very famous, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, he was crowned king as Tutankhaten. Okay? He was 9 years old, and he's in no position to make any decisions about anything, really. He's led by the men in the court, and these are the same men who led with his father. And these are the same men who were forced to change from a moon to a 10. And Tutankhamun, well, Tutankhaten basically is the name he was given at birth for the god of 10. Eventually, his name is forced to be changed to Tutankhamun, as we know it, which means the beautiful in life as Amun. This happens in his third year of his reign, and it's believed that these men in the court were pressuring him and forced him to basically go back to be loyal to Amun. The change was recorded on a stela currently that's in the Cairo Museum. There's also a change of the capital. Originally, he was at his capital of his father in Akhetaten. But they moved back to Luxor with the whole entire court. And the Akhetaten is completely abandoned, falls into ruins, and which is one of the reasons why we don't have very information about that time period in that area. King Tut takes a wife. Her name is Akhensitpatun. It's one of Akhenaten's surviving daughters, who, by the way, happened to be his wife, which is a little weird, right? But she's 4 years older than Tut, and they have two children, but unfortunately those children are both stillborn. Her name changed to Ankhesenamun, which means she lives for Amun. What we know of his life, of King Tut's life, is very little. There's some statues that we have. The one's in the Louvre in France. It's standing under the protection. He's portrayed as standing under the protection of the god Amun. There's also a huge statue of him in the Chicago Museum. One of the things we do know that he did was he built what's called the Avenue of the Sphinxes, okay? And the Avenue of the Sphinxes is basically what it sounds like, a row of sphinxes that was built during his time that connects the Temple of Karnak with the Temple of Mut. We don't have any records of him waging any type of war, and there's nothing that gives his real chronology of his reign, okay? Most of what we know comes from his death, and that's kind of where his fame comes from too, right? His death, he was given a lavish burial in the Valley of the Kings. Care was taken to conceal his tomb, okay? You have Ramses VI, which was part of the 20th dynasty. And you're like, why are we skipping ahead? Well, it's important because the workers who built the tomb for Ramses VI in this 20th dynasty also built in the Valley of Kings, and they selected a site that was just above Tutankhamun's site. And as they chiseled away the stone and made this tomb for Ramses VI, they kept dumping their chips and their extra rock and things down, which wound up right on top of Tut's tomb. It ultimately buries it completely and protects it. And so that's why it was not found for a very long time. Here in the Valley of the Kings, there was lots of excavations that was going on. There was a man named Theodore Davis and a few others who found most of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. They had accounted for most of the known pharaohs. They eventually announced there's nothing else to be found. They found it all. They think there's nothing of value to be found there. And this Theodore Davis relinquishes his permit to excavate the area. He basically says, I'm done. I don't need this permit anymore. I'll give it back to you. Well, there's also a man named Howard Carter during this time. And Howard Carter has no formal university education, but he's a great artist. He has huge, he can draw. He can, just is brilliant with being able to basically turn pictures of the things he sees. He's invited to Egypt by the famous architect and archaeologist Sir Flinders Petrie. He's there from around 1890 to 1908, and he's truly there for his artistic ability, okay? Because remember, during this time, they don't have cameras, they don't have videos, they can't take, nobody's pulling their cell phone out and taking pictures and videos and recording everything. So in order to record what they've seen, they have to have somebody there that can draw and sketch and do it fairly quickly and do it very well. And that's why he's invited. But while he's there, he's gaining valuable experience and valuable knowledge. And he's putting it all together. And he winds up with this hunch, okay? He knows that King Tutankhamun's tomb has not been found. He has a hunch that it's there in this existing area. And so after Theodore Davis relinquishes his permit, Carter goes and gets a permit and applies for the permit to excavate the area. The problem, again, with Carter is that he has no formal education, he's not a rich person, and this takes money. So he gets in contact with Lord Carnarvon. He winds up financially sponsoring Carter's dig, okay? This man is in poor health, and the doctor basically says, you need to find a dry climate. That's the only way you're going to be healthier and survive and live a little bit longer. So he goes to Egypt. He's, what better place than the dry climate of Egypt? So he is financing Carter's digs, and after a little while, he's kind of getting tired of Carter, and you're not finding anything. I'm wasting all my money on you. And by 1921, he's pretty much done with Carter. He's like, we're not going to do this anymore. But Carter pleads for one more year. He's begging him for one more year. And eventually, he says, okay. So he starts his dig again in 1922. And there's when he finally finds King Tut's tomb, okay? Page 160 of your book. It says this. Carter was a brilliant archaeologist and was ahead of his time in archaeological procedures, but naturally, he was not up to the sophisticated methods we use today. His main objective was the retrieval and preservation of artifacts, and to that end, he purchased 1 mile of wadding and 2 miles of bandages to protect his finds. He meticulously noted the exact location of every item he found and applied the latest methods of preserving them. With painstaking methods, it took him 10 months just to expose the mummy and 10 years to remove every object from the tomb. However, as he was trying to gather these artifacts, he did a lot of damage to the mummies themselves. Some of the things he did was they're trying to get the bracelets off the arms. They wouldn't come off, so he would break the arms. There was a big kind of necklace and things that he couldn't get off, so he just removed the heads. There was very little concern, and now we're thinking, oh my gosh, why would you do such a thing? But back then, especially as far as Lord Carnarvon was concerned, he just needed that money to reimburse himself, right? So there was this kind of controversy, but at the time it was kind of normal. And the book says, even though these methods horrify us today, they seemed very reasonable in those days. Tutankhamun's mummy had 150 pieces of jewelry in the wrappings, and there were 2,000 objects in the burial chamber alone, and a total of 5,000 artifacts, counting the items from the antechamber and the storeroom, which explains why it took Carter so long to complete his work on the tomb. When he walked into the tomb, there was a wall of gold inside the door. It wound up being a giant box of gold. There was actually 4 boxes of gold, one inside each other. Eventually, as he's going through this, he gets to a sandstone sarcophagus that was in the 4th box. Inside the sarcophagus, they have 3 nesting coffins as well. The inner coffin was just complete solid gold. It was a ½ inch thick of gold and weighed 242 pounds. So, Lord Carnarvon was definitely trying to get his money back. Like I said, and this is why we get so many wonderful things that were found in this tomb, and that's why, King Tut is kind of famous, because we don't know much about his life, and what he did in his life really doesn't matter. But because of all the wonderful artifacts, he became famous. Everybody knows him. Everybody talks about the King Tut, and it was all because of these findings that they had. The last thing I want to do is this. It says, historically, Tutankhamun was one of the least of the pharaohs. He was only about 10 years of age when he succeeded to the throne, and what happened during his reign was probably most due to the decision of nobles. His fame is entirely due to the sensational discovery of his almost intact tomb by Howard Carter in 1922. Carter was a brilliant, though eccentric archaeologist, and though his methods were ahead of his time, some steps he took horrify us today. But because of that, he is famous, and that's why we want to talk about King Tut. Thanks.